Let's talk about tooltips in Power BI. If you don't know what a tooltip is, it's the little pop-up that appears whenever you hover your mouse pointer over a data point. Like when I hover my mouse over this column in a column chart, I get to see some information about that column, like what is the product name and what are the total sales. Likewise, in this shape map chart, if I hover my mouse pointer over a state, I get to see the state name and the total sales for that state. But what if we could make our tooltip give us better information? In fact, any information that we want, not what the system wants to give us. Such as when I hover my mouse over this bar, I get to see every supplier, their number of sales, the total sales for that supplier in descending order by total sales. And I can hover from bar to bar and get different information. In my shape map, I could hover over a state and get a breakdown of which products were sold in that state, the name of the state, and the total sales. So Utah, Kansas, Alabama. This video is going to show you how to create those custom tooltips and do it two different ways, the default built-in method and then a custom method. I'll also show you two different ways to deploy the tooltip in either Visual Specific mode or Global Report mode. Feel free to download the files for this project from the link in the video description so you can follow along with me, or just open up the solution file and check out all the settings. Let's take a brief moment just to look at the data model so we understand what data we're working with. I have a table here called domestic sales, which has items like product, sale date, state, and supplier. There's also price and quantity, but those fields I'm not going to use in my report. They're going to be used for calculations in my measures. Beside that, I have a dedicated measures table with three very simple calculations, a sum, an average, and a count function. Looking at the table view of the domestic sales table, this is what the data looks like. Let's look at what I like to refer to as a level 1 tooltip customization. And this is where we just enhance the built-in tooltip feature. Now in the report view, I've built a very simple column chart. And if we switch to the build panel, we can see that I have put product in the x-axis and the total sales measure in the y-axis. Now that serves as the bare minimum amount of information for this visual to work. If we hover our mouse over one of the columns, we'll see the name of the product and the total sales. So each field loaded into the x-axis and y-axis field wells is included in the tooltip. This is the default behavior. But what if you also wanted to show in this tooltip the average sales and the number of sales? In the build section, we have a field well called Tooltips. And if we click Add Data, I'll go to Measures. I already have total sales as a tooltip because it's in my y-axis. But I can add additional measures into this tooltip field well, like the average sales and the number of sales. I'll close this, and now when I hover over a data point, I get additional calculations in that tooltip. So I'm going to remove those added tooltips from the tooltips field well. Now let's take it to level 2, creating our own custom tooltip. To do this, we're going to go down and create a new page in the report, and I'm going to name this page Details Table. Let's go to the Format section of Power BI, and under Page Information, we're going to change this from a standard page to a tooltip page. This will automatically reduce our canvas size. The size of this canvas is predetermined and fixed. Notice if I go into Canvas Settings, it's set to a tooltip, and it defaults to 240 by 320. The next exercise, I'll show you how to make this any size you want. But sticking with the default size, I'm going to go up and add a table to this. I'll put it in the corner, stretch it out. And for the fields, I'll go into my domestic sales table, and I'm going to add supplier. In my measures, I'm going to add the number of sales and the total sales. Closing those panels, my font size is just slightly too big, so I'll select this visual, and I like to go into the search bar and type in GLO for glow to find the global font size control. And I'm just going to reduce that from 10 points to 9 points, just so I don't have to do that tiny bit of scrolling. It's not centered, so I'll go ahead and resize this, and then I'll move it into the middle of the canvas. So this is what I want to pop up when somebody hovers over one of the bars in the column chart. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go up into the options of the visual, and I'm going to sort this by total sales, and I'm also going to make sure that it's sorted in descending order, because I want to see this in performance order by total sales instead of alphabetical order by supplier. When published, this sheet should not be a normal sheet that the user can click on. It should be in service as a tooltip for the dashboard. So we're going to go down to the Sheets tab, right-click, and we're going to hide it. Now you won't see it hidden in the developer view of Power BI, but that Sheet tab will not be visible once published. There are two ways to deploy a tooltip, either globally to every visual in the report that uses a specific field, or locally to specific visuals. Let's look at the global option first. If I want this tooltip to appear on any visual that uses product so I can see where those products were sold by which supplier, I'll go back to page information. And in the tooltip section, I'm going to add a data field here. And this is going to be the field that if it's used in any visual throughout the report, this tooltip will appear. So if I check product, close this, if I go back to the dashboard, since these columns represent products, when I hover over a column, it shows me the tooltip that's been assigned to the products field. Any visual in the report that uses products as its story will now show this tooltip. In fact, just as a quick demonstration, I'll start a new sheet, go up and add a table, and then just add product to the table. I'll also go into my measures and add total sales. Tables by default have their tooltips deactivated, so I will have to go over to properties of this visual and just activate the tooltip feature. Notice it says that the page is set to auto. That way when I hover over a product, it will automatically go and get the tooltip associated with the product field. If you don't want the tooltip, you can always turn it off. So back on the tooltip construction page, if you add a field to the tooltip itself, it becomes global. That way you don't have to add this on every single visual that uses a product. But what if you want your tooltip to only be applied to specific visuals? Well, in this case, I'm going to take product out of the global setting. I'll go back to the dashboard. Notice now I'm back to the default tooltip. But if I want that details table tooltip to appear here, I'll click on the visual, go into the format properties section, and under tooltips, change this from auto to the specific named page that has the tooltip I created, in this case, details table. Now when I hover over a bar, I see the tooltip. But if I were to go to any other visual that uses product in its story, this tooltip will not appear. So assigning a field to the tooltip becomes a global behavior. Assigning the tooltip to the visual becomes visual specific. And lastly, level 3 tooltips. This is a tooltip that you have 100% control over. In this shape map, when I hover over a state, I'm getting just the default tooltip. But let's say that I want a donut chart that breaks that state down by the products that were sold in that state, shows the percentage of each product and the total sales for the state. We'll create a new page, but this time when I go to page information, I'm not going to change this to a tooltip because that's going to lock me into that small, non-resizable tooltip canvas. I'm going to hit undo. Before I forget, I'm going to go down and rename this sheet to details donut. So we're going to leave the page information page type set to standard, but instead go to the canvas settings and change this from a 16:9 interface to a custom interface. And here's where you can then design a canvas size of your choosing. So in my case, I'm going to choose a canvas size of 250 pixels high by 433 pixels wide. I'll set my alignment to middle. Now in this case, the window automatically zoomed to fill that canvas to the screen size. This is going to give me a false perspective on how this visual is going to look because it's going to be too big. So I'm going to go back down to my zoom settings and set this back to 100% because I want to work with this in the true size that it will appear when used in the report. So I'm going to go up and create a donut chart. I'll give it the full canvas size. For the legend, I'll go into domestic sales and add product. And for the values, I'll go into the measures and add total sales. I'll close those. I'm going to do a small amount of customization. I don't want a legend and I don't want a title. I like to take advantage of the empty space in the center of the donut to provide additional information. In this case, the name of the state I'm hovering over and the total sales for that state. So basically the information that the default tooltip was giving me before I replaced it. I'm going to do this through a card visual. Make sure you click away from the visual because you don't want to convert this into a card. So I'll go up and add a card visual. Now this card visual is going to be very small and I'm going to put it right here in the middle. The field for this card will be the domestic sales table state. Now since a card can only show one item, like a scalar value, it can't show me all 50 states, so it just shows the first state that it sees, in this case Alabama. But when this gets used as a tooltip, the only state it will see will be the state that your pointer is hovering over. So it becomes a dynamic title. Let's do a little customization. I don't want a category label, and I'm going to go into the callout value and set the font size to 12 points. I'm also going to go into size and style and turn off the background. And I'll go ahead and put this right about here. Clicking away from the visual, I'll add a second card, size it down, position it. The field for this card will be a measure of total sales. Let's do the same kind of customization. No background, no category label. I'll go into callout value and set the font size to 17. Position this, and now I have my custom donut tooltip. I almost forgot. Look at the data labels. They're showing us the total sales for a product and the percentage of those sales, but we don't know what that product is. So I'm going to change the story that these data labels are portraying. So I'll click on the visual, and in data labels, the label content, I'm going to change this to category and percent of total. So that way I know what the product is and what percentage of sales. Let's hide this sheet so it doesn't appear as a normal sheet in the published report. Now clicking on the canvas, earlier when we were in page information, we left page type as standard. That way we could go to the canvas settings and define our own height and width and not use the default built-in Tooltip canvas size. But once you've defined that height and width, you still need to go back to page information and set this as a tooltip. Otherwise, it won't show up as a selectable option when we go to the visual. We'll return to the map report sheet. I'll do a zoom fit on my visual. When we hover over a state, we get the default tooltip. Let's click on the visual, go to Properties, and under Tooltips, we'll change this from Auto to the specific tooltip sheet that we want this visual to use. In this case, the details donut. Now when I hover over a state, I get my donut chart. Now I can go from state to state, see all the products sold, the percentage of their sales, the total sales, and also the name of the state, in case I didn't do so well in geography class. So now you've seen an example of the built-in tooltip, a slightly enhanced version of the built-in tooltip, a custom tooltip using the default settings, and a complete custom tooltip where you call all the shots. So let me know in the comments if you've used tooltips before, have you customized them, and maybe if you know any other tricks that I might not have covered. I've tried to include as much in this video as possible, but I'm sure somebody out there has found something even more creative for tooltips than I demonstrated. Don't forget to download the exercise files from the link in the video description so you can practice this, and then go out and start making some awesome tooltips in your reports. Thank you for watching, and remember at BCTI, the learning never stops.